Hello. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on translating from English to the language of truth functional logic, and more specifically, doing that without conditionals. In the next video, for practice problem set 3-4, we'll also be talking about translation that includes conditionals. The translation is I guess it's difficult material because it is so detail oriented. You have to pay very close attention to very small details in order to get your translations to be as accurate as possible. It will not be long before we are translating ordinary everyday statements, not silly artificial statements that I've made up. I think with this material, though, given its focus on detail, it can be useful to spend some time on these kind of made-up examples where I can make them up to control for every little logical detail, and I can also control the level of difficulty. If we stopped with this, though, I think this material would be completely useless for you. The reason we are doing this at all is so that rather than simply translating individual statements, when we are looking at truth functional arguments that were expressed in ordinary everyday English, we will be able to translate them from that English to the language of truth functional logic, which is a necessary setup step for being able to use formal methods for testing those arguments for validity. We would never do this translation for its own sake. It would be ridiculous, useless, really, pointless. We are doing it for reasons that we will not get to until next week when we start doing validity testing. So be patient with me, with the material, but also please be patient with yourselves as you're learning this material that is so detail-focused. In practice problem set 3-3, I have given you a variable assignment to use in your translations. Remember that in truth functional logic, variable letters have to stand for complete statements. They have to stand for simple statements, that is, statements you cannot break down into further parts that are themselves statements. And they have to stand for affirmative statements rather than for negations. We always start our variable assignment with P, and then we go up the alphabet however far we need to, letting each variable letter stand for a simple statement. So in this assignment, or this practice problem set, I've just let P stand for Piam goes to Gloria's party, and Q for Key goes to Gloria's birthday party. Let me start with number 3, which says Key will not go to Gloria's birthday party, even though Piam will. Now, before I just do a translation here, I'm going to do what I call an intermediate step translation, which means I'm going to let variable letters, which are already assigned, substitute for the simple statements for which they stand, and leave any words or phrases that indicate logical structure. I'm also going to leave any punctuation that was in the original, because punctuation sometimes, not always, sometimes helps us understand where there are important logical breaks. So let's see. 3 starts out by saying Key will not go to Gloria's birthday party. Key will not go, that's the negation of Q, comma, even though Piam will, which is asserting that Piam goes to Gloria's birthday party. Oh, one little bit of review here from the reading. This system of logic is not sensitive to tense. So my variables, you see, stand for present tense statements. In what I was just reading, it was future tense. That's an important difference, or at least it can be in English. This system of logic is not sensitive to that, to tense, so tense gets lost in our translations, and we just live with that difference in meaning. Just like if you were translating from, Korean to Portuguese, there are differences between those two languages such that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you would not be able to keep every bit of the meaning in the original Korean in your translation into Portuguese. And you would just have to live with that loss of meaning when it occurred. All right, so back to number 3 then. Got negation sign Q, comma, even though P. The only thing, well, we'll get rid of the comma in our translation, but the only thing we need to think about is how to translate even though. Even though is a phrase that in English indicates contrast. You can think of the word but, B-U-T, as a model contrast word in English. Contrast words and phrases, when they indicate any logical relationship at all, indicate conjunction. The contrast part of the meaning gets lost in our translation, but, well, that's inevitable. We don't worry about it. We pay attention to the logical meaning, and again, contrast words and phrases, when they indicate any logical meaning at all, indicate conjunction. So replace even though with the symbol that we use to represent conjunction. To remind you, that's the ampersand. So our answer for number 3 would be negation sign Q, ampersand P. I don't care in your written work whether you turn in this intermediate step or even whether you do it on scratch paper or anything for yourselves. That's up to you. If you find it helpful to do it, go ahead and do it. No need to bother erasing it or deleting it before you turn your work in to me. I don't care. I do care, though, about the final translation and its accuracy. All right, let's go down then to number 6, which is a neither nor statement. Neither Piam nor Key is going to go to Gloria's birthday party. So just substituting the variables for the statements for which they stand, we get neither P nor Q. 2 different ways that you can understand this, which are truth functionally equivalent to each other, so equally good. First off, ask yourself this series of questions. According to what this said, is Piam going to go to Gloria's birthday party? Well, no. And how about Key? Is Key going to go to the party? No. So this is telling us that P is false and Q is also false. Neither one of those people is going to go to the party. Another way to understand neither nor is as the negation of the corresponding either or statement. It's like the N at the start of neither and the N at the start of nor are both signaling that either P or Q is false. Either P or Q is false. The negation sign before this open parenthesis indicates the negation sign applies to what's inside the parentheses understood as a whole unit. So here the negation sign applies to P wedge Q. Either one of these 2 translations is totally correct. They're truth functionally equivalent to each other. You certainly would not need to turn in both if you were doing this on a homework assignment. Either one would be completely correct and completely, well, complete. It would be fine by itself, in other words. All right, I want to go down to number 9, which says Piam won't go to the birthday party, so that's the negation of P. Piam won't go unless Key does. As an intermediate step, then, we'd have negation sign P unless Q. As I discussed in the assigned reading, there is a way to understand unless as indicating a conditional. We are not yet at the point, though, in the assigned reading where we are translating conditionals. And even when we get there, my very, very strong suggestion or recommendation is that you treat unless as a way of expressing disjunction. Your translation as a disjunction will be much easier than your translation as a conditional for unless. So you're less likely to make mistakes. So if we take unless as a way of signaling or expressing disjunction, that just means replacing unless with the wedge. So we get here negation sign P, wedge Q. Let's go now to number 11. I'm going to have 11 and 12 on the board at the same time to compare and contrast them. 11 says Piam and Key won't both go to Gloria's birthday party. Trying to stress won't both with my voice to indicate its importance. Won't both. The N apostrophe T at the end of the word won't is, of course, a contraction for the word not. So this is will not. In other words, not both. Not comes before both. And that order of these two words is absolutely crucial to getting our translation right. Both is a way of expressing conjunction. Not immediately before both is telling us that it's false that this conjunction is true. In other words, not both signals the falsity of the conjunction expressed by both. Well, what's that conjunction? Both P and Q, of course, we would write that as P ampersand Q. We're going to group that inside of parentheses so that then when we put the negation sign in front of the parentheses, we've made it clear that the negation sign applies to the entire conjunction. It doesn't just apply to P, it applies to the conjunction P ampersand Q. Now, looking at number 12, this says both Piam and Key won't go to Gloria's birthday party. Focus just on both won't, or even to simplify further, an apostrophe T, of course, is a contraction for not. So here we have both not what? P and Q. Look at the difference between 11 and 12. In 11 we have not both, in 12 we have both not. And although this may seem like an overly picky little detail, it is absolutely crucial to understanding the logic of what these two things are saying and how they are different. In not both, not comes first. Not is a way of expressing negation. So in 11, overall what we're looking at is a negation. In 12, both comes first. Both is a way of expressing conjunction. So in 12, overall what we're looking at is a conjunction. We take not into account in 12 by understanding that both not is giving us a conjunction where each conjunct is a negation. Each conjunct is a negation. So in 12, okay, if I read how this thing just reads, it's negation sign P ampersand negation sign Q. Negation sign P is one conjunct. It would be incorrect to say that P is a conjunct here. It's not. Negation sign P is a conjunct. Negation sign Q is the other conjunct. 11 and 12, these two formulae are not truth functionally equivalent to each other. I gave you some examples in the reading to try to make this intuitive for you, and I hope that you also understand or remember the testing for truth functional equivalence that we did last week. You could prove yourselves, based on the material we did last week, that these two formulae are not truth functionally equivalent to each other. They're importantly different. All right, I just want to do one more from from practice problem set 3-3 for you. This is number 20 at the end of the practice problems. And says either Piam or Key, but not both, will go to Gloria's birthday party. So either P or Q, but not both. But not both what? Not both P and Q. Here we have a way in English of specifying that we are using the word or exclusively. I went over in the reading for you the difference between the inclusive use of the word or and the exclusive use of the word or. Inclusive or, if we were making it clear we meant or inclusively, we might say and/or. That's a common way of making clear that or is meant inclusively. But not both is a common way of making clear, well, but not both together with either or. is a common way of making clear that or is meant exclusively. By the way, this is not only a quirk of English, it's common in Romance languages. And those of you who know Spanish know that from o, which would translate into English as or. That's ambiguous, just like or is in English between inclusive and exclusive. Okay, so how are we going to translate this? It might look complex, and I guess there is a certain degree of logical complexity, but it's really not that difficult, just so long as you go step by step. Don't try to take bigger chunks than you should at any time. Just start with either P or Q. You know how to translate either P or Q already. That's just P veg Q. Let's put that inside of parentheses for grouping. Next, just take the word but all by itself. But is a contrast word, and when contrast words or phrases indicate any logical meaning at all, they indicate conjunction, which we represent with the ampersand. Now we need not both P and Q, which was in one of the examples I went over immediately preceding number 20. Not both is the negation of both. So it's telling us that P ampersand Q is false. So here's the way to translate one or the other, but not both, the exclusive use of the word or. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I will talk to you again very soon in another video. Take care. Bye-bye.